would you now please help us welcome our speaker this evening from Steel on Steel Group in Swansea, Mass., Bob B.
Bob.
Hi everybody, my name is Bob. I'm an alcoholic.
Hello.
It's good to be here with you in the spirit of fellowship. I am a member of Steel on Steel. I'm also a member of the Conscious Contact Group, which is an 11-step meditation group. And I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous in general. My sobriety date is November 12th, 1993. I don't consider myself an expert on sobriety, on spirituality, on literature, or anything else for that matter. What I have is my experience. And my experience for this particular meeting, based on its group conscience, my experience with unity service and recovery. So at Steel on Steel, by chance, we open every meeting with what we call sharpening our tools, okay? The meeting name Steel on Steel, and you may hear some of this again, because you have some Steel on Steel members that will be speaking later on here at this meeting. Comes from some verses that talk about, as iron sharpens iron, man sharpens man. What that means is we hold ourselves accountable. We hold ourselves accountable to what? Where we are within the 3 legacies of service. So we have a framed picture of the triangle, the circle, and the words unity, service, and recovery on there. And it's not for me to explain what that is. It's to hold myself accountable to my group members where I am in all 3 parts of that circle and that triangle. So that's what I want to do for you to open the meeting. So we're in unity. I find unity in the fellowship and the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? I have a bodily allergy. My body is sickened, so I bring my body to the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been coming to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings since November 12th, 1993, and I really haven't stopped coming to meetings since then. There may have been a brief period of time for some reason or another where a month had slipped by where I didn't go to a meeting. I don't go to meetings because I have to go to meetings. I go to meetings because I want to go to meetings, because I want the fellowship found there, okay? So the second part is, so I go to meetings, right? I go to meetings and I fellowship with people. The second part is the base of the triangle where it talks about recovery. I've been through all 12 steps. I've had a spiritual awakening, and I've made every single amends that I can possibly make up until this point. So I have that covered. As far as service, we take in that service, that recovery piece is the mind, right? I have the body allergy, and I have that mental obsession of the mind. I treat that in that bottom triangle in the recovery process where I have a recovered mind, okay? Covered from that hopeless state of mind and body. I take that recovered mind into the spirit, which is the third part of my illness, the spiritual malady. I take that recovered mind into service and work with other men and women in Alcoholics Anonymous so that they can have their own experience with the 3 sides of that triangle. So I am fully active in all 3 sides of that triangle, and the circle that touches all 3 points represents the fact that when I do that, I am now useful and whole, not useless and hopeless like I was the day before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. So that's where I am within that, the 3 legacies. Now, I guess I'll just share some experience with all 3 parts of that, of those legacies. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I got sober in South Boston, and I was very, very sick, obviously. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. I wasn't going to hide from meetings. Everybody knew I was a drunk, right? So there was no need for me to hide. So I went to a meeting on a Friday night. It was called the L Street Friday night meeting, and there were probably 200 people in the room, and I knew half of them. And I sat down and I thought to myself, if I was going to get sober, if it was going to have to be an Alcoholics Anonymous, because up to that point, nothing else worked. And there was nothing else left for me to do. So I'm talking about the unity. So I started to go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? I brought the body to meetings. And I went to meetings every single day. I went to 2 and 3 meetings a day, every single day. I was enabled in my drinking and at my job because I was very good at it. And I did my boss's job. And so at lunchtime, when I would go to the bar room and not come back, it was okay. Because my work was done for the day and his work was done for the day. So I was enabled in my drinking. I was covered for. And the same thing happened when I started to go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was able to go to early bird meeting, and then I'd come back a little bit late from lunch because I would go to a loony noonie, and then I'd be at a meeting at night. And at least coming back late from lunch was better than not coming back at all. So my boss was happy with that. So I was going to meetings every single day. And I got hooked up with a bunch of old timers, a bunch of guys that took me under their wing. And they knew exactly what they were doing. You know, they would just tell me, just don't drink, go to meetings, ask for help. Don't drink, go to meetings, ask for help, shut up, kid. You don't know what you're talking about. But they were doing it jokingly, right? There was never a harsh word ever said to me. You know what I mean? So they took me under the wings, and everything they ever said to me was a slogan of AA. Every question, every problem that I ever presented with them, every single day, they just said, easy does it, live and let live, let go, let God, hold on, whatever. It was just all slogan talk. And that was the fellowship that I got. And I liked it. I actually liked it. And then eventually I started to meet some people my own age. I was 27 years old when I got sober. And I started meeting different people and people my own age and started hanging out with them before meetings and after meetings. And next thing you know, I was running with a group of men and women in the scores and scores of people. 40 and 50 and 60, 80 people down at the beach after a meeting, hanging out in little groups and cliques and moving back and forth. And I found myself every single night of the week, I was with people from Alcoholics Anonymous. We were either playing poker, going to the movies. There were sober clubs back then in Quincy. It was Clouds and Footprints. And so we were just hanging out. And then we started going... we started renting houses down at Cape, and it was just a lot of fellowship. But my fondest memory of the unity of Alcoholics Anonymous happened very, very early. I got sober on November 12th. My uncle belonged to a group called Let Go, Let God. They met on a Thursday night. It was Thanksgiving. And I went to that meeting with my uncle, and they said, afterwards, we're going to this guy, Allie's house, to have desserts. Would you like to come with us? I said, of course I'd like to come with you. I had nothing else to do. I had nothing else to do. And I was still shaking and rattling and rolling from not drinking. So I went to Allie's house, and I walked in, and I just remember... in the kitchen, there was just tables and tables and tables of desserts. Just tables of desserts. And I love desserts. I absolutely love desserts. I found heaven. So I was just finding my way around the dessert table and everything like that. And then I heard some music in another room. And I walked into the other room, and Allie was sitting down. And he was in a room that had these shelves, just piles and piles and piles and piles of tapes. And he was listening to blues music. So I sat down with Allie, and we just started talking and listening to blues music. And it was the first time that I felt comfortable without a drink in my hand. And it just settled me in, and I'll never, ever forget that night. That was my first real sense of fellowship in unity, was just a couple of weeks into sobriety. Thing is, Allie didn't stay sober. Allie drank and Allie died, right? Because that's what happens to us when we drink. People like me drink, I die. But I'll always remember like his kindness. And also what happened was for fellowship, some people in that same group of Let Go, Let God, they had house meetings. They did a house meeting on a different night, and they would rotate through some literature. They would rotate through like the 12 and 12 and the Big Book and As Bill Sees It and Keep It Simple. And so they asked me to come to that. And so I started fellowshipping there. And actually I picked up that tradition, and I've been doing meetings in my house ever since then. Ever since I can remember, I started doing meetings in my house, and I still do it today, as a matter of fact. So that was a fellowship that I found here, right? And the book tells us, create the fellowship that you crave. and I crave fellowship. Like, I need to be around people. My wife hates it. She doesn't need to be around people. She has her little group of girls, Rick's wife and some other girls, her spiritual group. But I just love people, and I always want to have people over the house, do the meetings with that. I just crave fellowship. I crave fellowship in the bar room. That's why I went to the bar room. I could have stayed home and drank. I went to a bar room because I craved fellowship. I always wanted to be with people. And then if you want to, if we look at our traditions, right, which is where the part of unity is covered under our 12 traditions. The very first one says personal recovery depends on AA unity. And our common welfare comes first, not my welfare, not Russ's welfare, our welfare. Our common welfare comes first. So that's what those 12 traditions are about, how we can live together as a group so that our common welfare comes first, not our individual welfare. The byproduct of that is individual recovery depends on AA unity. And I think it says it must. I'm like a very black and white guy. It says it must or else we perish. And when I read that, I'm like, perish. Perish means die, I don't want to die. So I kind of like the traditions for living within Alcoholics Anonymous. My experience with unity has just continued on all through my years while being sober, and continuing to have meetings in the house. I belonged to several different groups. I belonged to the Design for Living group in South Boston for many years, and then I moved down to Easton. I was always a member of a group. Always had a job in that group, but always a member of a group. And then I moved down. I was a member of the How group, all commitment groups. And then I found Steel on Steel, and I like to say I lived like 3 different lives inside Alcoholics Anonymous, and they're kind of like in chunks, 10 years, and then the last 8 years. I've been a member of Steel on Steel for like the last 7 or 8 years, somewhere around that. I can't remember, but I found the fellowship that I craved within that group too. So that's really my experience with unity. The recovery part starts with the first step, obviously, right? I'm powerless. So I was powerless over alcohol, and my life was unmanageable. But I really didn't understand what I was powerless over, right? I came to Alcoholics Anonymous because I thought I had a problem with alcohol. I mean, people in my life were telling me my entire life were telling me that I had a problem with alcohol. People in my life were trying to stop me from drinking from the very first time that I picked up a drink, as a matter of fact. The first time I set out to get drunk, I was about, I don't know, somewhere around that magical age, 12 years old. I nipped and sipped my entire life, but the first time I picked up a drink, I was about 12 years old. I set out to get drunk. I knew I was going to get drunk. I went up to M Street Park. We had little Miller ponies, some Tango, maybe some schnapps involved, right? And I drank everything I could, and I got really, really sick. I threw up all over my nice brand new Irish knit sweater. I fell down the bleachers. I got all bloody and cut up. I went home, and my father beat the crap out of me because I was 12 years old and I wasn't supposed to be drinking. But from that moment on, till the time I put it down, I was powerless over alcohol. Even though that what happened to me, I could not wait to do it again. I obsessed over what I thought I was obsessing was over alcohol. Because I thought I had an alcohol problem. I thought alcohol was my problem. And even when I came to AA for a long time, people were telling me alcohol was my problem. They said you have a mental, physical, spiritual disease, right? You obsess over alcohol. You put alcohol in you. You have an allergic reaction. Your body craves more. And the spiritual part was all the filthy, dirty, nasty things you did. Well, that's really not the case for me. That's not how it worked for me. It was actually just the exact opposite. I had a spiritual malady that when I put alcohol into my system, I got a sense of ease and comfort. And then the allergic reaction happened. So it was spiritual, the allergic reaction, and then I started obsessing. But what was I really obsessing over? I wasn't obsessing over alcohol. I was obsessing over that sense of ease and comfort I got from the alcohol. I needed that sense of ease and comfort from that spiritual malady. What was the spiritual malady? I was restless, irritable, and discontent. I was full of shame, guilt, remorse, terror, frustration, bewilderment, despair, anger, resentment, low self-esteem, self-pity. That was before I ever took a drink. I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to tell you for any sort of pity or empathy. I'm just trying to explain where my spiritual malady came from. That's all the reason I'm telling you. At 2 years old, my biological mother put me and my two sisters in a cab and sent me to my grandmother's house. Those two sisters had a terminal disease called cystic fibrosis. And back then, the life expectancy was 5 years old, and that's exactly when they died, when they were 5 and 6 years old. But she put us in a cab, sent us to my grandmother's house, where she was raising 7 of her own children in a cold water flat with her father-in-law on the 3rd floor and my father. So she abandoned us. My two sisters died at age 5 and 6. I watched my mother feed my grandfather through 2 holes in his back from cancer. I was sexually abused. I was picked on as a kid because I had a lazy eye and I had to wear a patch. So all the kids were picked on me when I was a kid. So I was full of all that spirituality. And this is not an excuse, and this is not anything. This is just my experience, right? This is what I was experiencing. And what happened was when I was 12 years old and I took that first drink, I took a huge sigh of relief. I found my solution. Alcohol seemed to be my solution. I found the solution to my spiritual malady. The only problem was the rest of that illness that I had, the bodily reaction and the mental obsession for that relief again. But when I wasn't drinking, I always went back to restless, irritable, discontent. And I couldn't stop drinking, no matter what the circumstances were in my life. I had losses of education. I went to one of the most prominent exam schools in the country, and they asked me to leave because I was selling drugs to the college students behind me. I lost a lot of relationships. I harmed a lot of people in my life. I had a military career. I finished my military career, but I lost a lot of rank and opportunities in there. I was always a good soldier, but whenever I drank, I used to get in trouble. I remember one story, my company commander, when I got in trouble from drinking for some reason, and my company commander said, usually they take money from you, they give you extra duty, they put you on restriction and everything like that. He said, I'm not going to do that to you this time. He says, your punishment is you are not allowed to drink this weekend. No drinking for you. He says, I'm going to come here Saturday morning, and I'm going to put you at the position of attention, and I'm going to sniff you up and down. I'm going to make sure that you weren't drinking the night before. And if you don't drink Saturday and Sunday, it's a wash. Don't worry about it. You're done. Saturday morning, just as planned, 7 o'clock in the morning, he knocked on the door. I could barely get up and open the door. Beer bottles all over the place, reeking of alcohol, stinking. I just could not drink. All I had to do was not drink to not get in trouble, and I couldn't do it. I'd say that story to emphasize the fact that people saw that I had a problem before I did, right? People, places, and things. My family tried to stop me from drinking. People I was in a relationship tried to stop me from drinking. School, the military, the law. I got an OUI, they tried to stop me. I almost burnt my mother's house down. That didn't stop me. I got shot in the projects. That didn't stop me. There were no circumstances that were going to affect, that could stop me from drinking. I was powerless. This is what I was really powerless over. I was powerless over, not alcohol, that the idea that I could fix my spirituality myself. That's what I was powerless over. To think that I could do something about this spirituality for which alcohol was my solution, that I could do that somehow. This time it will be different. Trying different alcohol, whatever we did, right? All the different things we tried, right? Not drinking, going drinking, relationship, not relationship, whatever it is. I was powerless over affecting that psychic change needed that had to come from a power greater than myself. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and I said, this isn't going to work for me. Because that very first Friday night, I saw the word God, and I didn't think this was going to work for me. Because I had no belief in God at that time. I had no conception of God. Matter of fact, if you gave me 5 minutes, I would have tried to talk you out of the God that you had. But I had that only requirement for membership in AA, which was the desire to stop drinking, and I didn't want to die. I had a first step experience on a bar stool, November 11th, 1993, in a gangster's bar in South Boston. What happened was, I went out drinking on Veterans Day, because I'm a veteran, that's what we do, at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I couldn't seem to get drunk. I drank in all the bars that I normally drank in with all the people that I normally drank with, and I couldn't seem to get drunk. I couldn't get the sense of ease and comfort. I couldn't stop the noise in my head. All the sounds were muffled. I didn't talk to people. I just kept waving the bartender, bring me another one. And then finally, I was at that last bar that night, and a thought occurred to me. And I had thoughts a million times that I don't want to do this again. I had that thought a million times. Based on my experience, I kind of knew what might happen to me. Not what was going to happen to me, but what might happen to me. I was going to spend all my money. I was going to do drugs. I was going to get into a fight. I was going to get arrested. Any of those things were possible to happen when I drank. Because I had that profound personality change, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Right? That's what happens to me when I drink. I'm a completely different person. So I had an idea of what might happen to me. And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this again. But I always found myself doing it. Well, I had a different thought this night. The thought that came into my head this night was, I can't do this anymore. I can't. I finally knew that alcohol had become my master. All right? I knew that very night the surrender happened. That very night. If I took one more drink, if I take one more drink, even today, I am going to die. Booze is going to kill me. If I don't believe that, I haven't fully conceded to my innermost self that I'm powerless over alcohol and that my life was unmanageable. See, my life wasn't unmanageable because all the dirty, filthy things that happened to me, like I was told when I got here, like that was my spiritual malady. My life was unmanageable because I was trying to manage my life through alcohol. I was trying to manage my spiritual malady through alcohol. That's what made my life unmanageable. I had no God. I didn't think this was going to work, but I continued to come because I didn't want to die. That's why I continued to come, because I didn't want to die. Frothy emotional pills seldom suffice. What does that look like for me? When my sainted grandmother, my mother, the woman that raised me, was standing in front of me with tears in her eyes, asking me, "Why do you drink the way you drink? Why can't you just stop?" And the truth was, I could have given her a million excuses or a million reasons. Why do you do the things you do? The truth was, I couldn't differentiate the truth from the false. I didn't even know. I did not know why. And if that wasn't sufficient enough to be the catalyst for me to stop drinking, then nothing else was going to be. Right? The insanity in my life was not the definition that I hear around here, right? The insanity in my life was not doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results because I had an idea what was going to happen based on my past experiences. The insanity in my life was knowing that and drinking anyways. I later found out what the true insanity in my life was. From going to Steel on Steel, so we're talking about step 2 now, right? If you haven't deducted that. I was in Steel on Steel, and I was just being bothered by a lot of things. Just being a lot of bother. And I went to Rick and I said, "Rick, I have a lot of problems in my life. I'm not happy, I'm restless, I'm ill, discontent, this, blah, blah." He says, "Listen, this is what I want you to do. I want you to listen to this tape." It was Joe Hawk and Mark Houston. And in the early 90s versions. So it's like 13 hours of tapes. They do Big Book Awakenings meetings, weekends, retreats. So I was at work and I had my headphones on and I was listening. I was on the roof. I do mechanical work and I was working on some rooftop units, and they started talking about step 2, and I had an epiphany. The insanity in my life was the bedevilments on page 52. Was I able to be useful to others? Was I able to affect my emotional state? All those bedevilments, right? But the truth was I was still agnostic. What does that mean for me was I wasn't trusting and relying in God in all areas of my life. So I was atheist, then I became agnostic. Right? And it wasn't until like my head just like cracked wide open. Like I had a spiritual experience on the roof at work. I knew then that I was not trusting and relying on God in all areas of life, all areas in my life, and that is really my true insanity. That's my experience now. It wasn't my experience for the first 20 years around here, right? My insanity was knowing what was going to happen and doing it anyway. But see, this is like I'm on my third life in AA I told you about, right? So my third life brought me to when I'm not trusting and relying on God in all areas of my life and I'm being agnostic, then that's what's going on with me. So they told me to turn my life and my will over to the care of God. And I did that. I was asking a God for help that I didn't even believe in. I was getting up every morning and saying, "God, please keep me away from a drink." That's it. It was just like that. Because they said, "Don't drink, ask for help, and go to meetings." That's what they said to do. I didn't want to drink, so I just started saying, "God, please keep me away from a drink." Knowing that it wasn't going to work and, God didn't exist. And then what happened was I met this kid, and we were talking about this last night. I met a Jewish crackhead from New York. And he was a Yankee fan, like my friend Mike here. And we're people who wouldn't normally mix. And he was in a halfway house in South Boston, and he was in the same group, the Design for Living group, and he invited me to a meeting they were having there on Saturday mornings, and it was a big book meeting. A bunch of guys in a halfway house. I was the only guy in that meeting that wasn't in that halfway house. So I went down there, and they were on chapter 4, the agnostics, and my life changed. My life absolutely changed, because it was in that chapter where I finally heard the message that I was supposed to hear, that you can have your own conception of God. That your conception of God didn't have to be anyone else's conception of God. And I also heard, who are you to say that there's no God? Right? And then by doing work with Rick, right? Rick and I working together, I found out that in that chapter is not really about finding God. It's about finding what's blocking you from God. Rick gave me an exercise. He said, go through the chapter and look for all the words that are blocking you from having a relationship with God. Prejudice, obstinance, all those words. There's a lot of them. I found a lot of them in there. But back to the when I first read that, and I said, it finally hit me that I could have my own conception of God. So that crack happened. That flimsy reed was now there for me. And I reached out for it. And I was still obsessing over alcohol, right? I was still thinking about alcohol because I was still spiritually sick. And I went back to one of the old timers and I said, his name was Stretch. They all had nicknames back then. It was Joe the Painter, Stretch, Satch, Jimmy the Safecracker. that's a good one. And I said, Stretch, I'm not drinking, but I'm still thinking about drinking. And he said, are you asking for help? That's how he talked out of the side of his mouth. I said, yeah, because I was. He said, well, why don't you ask God to remove your obsession, dumbass? That was his pet name for me. And so I was polite because he had been around here for a very long time and he was old. So I said, okay, Stretch, that's what I'm going to do. So the next day, I was 4 months sober or something like that, somewhere around there. And the next day I got up and I said, God, please keep me away from a drink and please remove my obsession for that drink. And this is my experience with this step. From that day to this day, I have not obsessed over alcohol. In fact, from that day to this day, the thought of actually taking a drink has never even entered my mind. My problem was removed immediately. That's the day I came to believe that a God could and would if he was sought. That's the day I came to believe. When I didn't obsess over drinking, that's the day I found a higher power in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have no idea what that was about, but that's the day I found it. And then they talked about clearing away all those things that block you from having that relationship in that inventory. And I did a very thorough inventory. And I took that inventory to somebody, and it wasn't an inventory like I've done recently, right? This was an inventory, it was basically write out your life story, but keep in mind all those principles. This was my first inventory. This is my experience, right? So it was basically a life story with all the dirty, filthy things that ever happened to me, and but keeping in mind the columns that were in the book, right? As I was writing. So I was writing out how it affected me. I was writing out what my role was in it. I was writing out the 7 areas of self, but I was writing it in a story format, not the column format. So I took that to a guy that was sponsoring me at the time. And we sat in a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot, and I read it to him. And he interjected with some of his experience, and gave me the instructions afterwards to go home for an hour, sit down and, contemplate what I did and water out of sand. The words are in there. I don't have to repeat them. But I didn't tell him one thing. It was the one thing that I was never going to tell anybody. It was the fact that I was molested. I just couldn't bring myself to tell him. I was still full of shame, guilt, and remorse. And so what happened was that same kid, that same person I met who was in that halfway house and that was in that big book meeting, they, according to their house rules, they had a list of people that they could do their 5th steps with. And there were a lot of priests on there. So I decided that I was going to take my 4th step and go back and read it to a priest. Now, I didn't do that because I was a religious person. Believe me. I did that because I knew he couldn't tell anybody. If there was someone that couldn't tell anybody, it was this guy. Now, he happened to be an alcoholic priest in recovery. So I went to the church in Dorchester and I told him everything, including the fact that I was molested. And when I left there, I swear I thought I had just taken 4 hits of acid. And I loved acid, by the way. I thought I had taken 4 hits of acid. I floated to my car. Floated. I was finally free. Not just free. Free. Everything was done. I got on the phone, I called that man up, I called Marty up, and I said, Marty, I gotta tell you something. I just came from Catholic priest, I told him there was something I didn't tell you. He said, no, you don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me, that's okay. He says, I get it, I understand. I said, no, you don't understand. I need to tell you now, because it doesn't bother me anymore. I was finally free. So that was my 5th and 6th step experience. Some friends of mine, they for a long time are trying to get me to read Drop the Rock. I don't think it's AA approved literature. I don't know. I've done a meeting on it in my house, so I'm kind of fond of it. But at the time, I wouldn't go near it. No, that's not AA literature. No, I don't want to read that. I resisted at all turns. Resisted. Finally, they wore me down, and I got the book Drop the Rock. And see, this is all about opening my mind up, right, to different experiences, belief systems, and concepts, right? That's what was happening to me. So I got the book Drop the Rock, and I read it, and boom, my brain just cracked open some more. I'm like, I gotta have a meeting on this. I gotta let everyone else know about this book and hear their experience with it. So I had a meeting in my house on Drop the Rock, and that's when I truly experienced 6 and 7. That was in my 2nd life of AA. In my 3rd life of AA, I had another experience. Rick and I did inventory about, 4 months ago. We did some inventory, and I had another different 6 and 7 step experience. Rick says, I know this little chapel. It's at my house. It's always open. We can just go by there someday. And we just go in there and sit, and we'll say some prayers, and then we'll just sit and contemplate a prayer in silence. And that was my most recent 6 and 7 experience, and it just blew I'm mindful that this recording blew my mind. So then they told me, we're still on this recovery part, I know, right? So then they told me, even though you had a profound personality change and you said and did things that you normally wouldn't say and do if you were drinking, you were to be held accountable for that. So you had to make a list of people you had harmed, and you had to go to every single one of them and make amends to them. And the funny thing they said to me, was, don't say you're sorry. Because based on his knowledge of me, don't ever say you're sorry. He says, because people have been hearing I'm sorry from you your entire life, and when you say you're sorry, people hear wah, 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 wah. They just don't hear it. You have to go to them, tell them the harm that you think you did to them, You ask them would they like to express their version of the harm you did, and you sit there and listen, and then when they're done, you say to them, what can I do to make this right? Is there anything that I can do to make this right? And if they say what you to do, if it's within reason and no one else will be harmed, you do it. So I set out to do that to every single person that I had harmed up to that point and up to this point. And when we got to 10 and 11, I heard a lot of different things about 10 and 11. And we were talking about this last night. If it's repeated enough, people will take it as gospel. So I had some different ideas about 10 and 11. I was saying prayer. My prayer life at this time was, God, keep me away from a drink. Please remove my obsession for that drink. I turn my life and my will over to your care. Please, God, remove from me every single character defect that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and to others. Pray only for the power and knowledge to carry out that will. That's how I started my day every day. Wrote prayers that didn't mean anything to me. At some point, didn't mean anything to me. I was doing the 3rd, 7, 11 step prayer, serenity prayers, Our Fathers, everything that just didn't mean anything to me anymore. That was my prayer life. My 10-step inventory, I thought, was another 4-step, which was erroneous. Eventually, I come to understand that the 10-step inventory was a spot check inventory. During the day when I find myself, I do certain things, right? Very clear-cut directions on when and how to do your step 10, my step 10. And then when we got to the 11th step of prayer meditation, again, that was my prayer, and meditation was not happening for me. Just wasn't happening. Because my brain would not stop. I had a racing brain that would not stop for 2 seconds. What happened was, eventually, I was sitting on the beach down at Cape. I used to go to Chatham, and I went to in the back of a little store, Tibetan store, and I got a book. And it was by Lama Surya Das, and it was called Awakening the Buddha Within. And I read that book and had some meditation techniques, and I started to practice meditation. And I would start to practice for 20 seconds and 2 minutes, and eventually that opened up a whole new avenue to my life. Where now, I've been introduced to people like Eckhart Tolle, Nasagadaka, all kinds of meditative giants, right? And my practice is without bounds now. So where I went from not being able to sit and meditate for 20 seconds, now I can sit for 5, 10, 15, 20, 2 hours, 3 hours at a time. It goes by like that. But that's my practice today. That's not the practice of prayer and meditation in the step. The practice of prayer and meditation in the 11th step is when we retire at night, we review our day. Review is the meditation. When thinking about our day ahead, the thinking about our day ahead is the meditation. When we consider our plans for the day, considering is the meditation in step 11. It says we ask God for direction. The ask is the prayer in 11th step meditation. So in the big book, clear-cut directions from 84 to 88 tell you the prayer and the meditation that they're talking about in step 11. Now, I have been blessed to expand that to a whole new realm in my life. That is the bedrock of my spiritual nature today. It's just the way it is for me. And then they said, if you do those 11 things, you will have a spiritual awakening. And my spiritual awakenings went like this. I was sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and a woman was crying because she had just lost her mother. And I felt bad for that woman, and I started to cry. Openly in an AA meeting with hundreds of people in it, and I didn't care. A few months later, that same woman had a she said she shared that she was pregnant. I was so happy for that woman, I started to cry openly in an AA meeting. Those are the educational variety that happen over time. Those are the spiritual awakenings I had, right? And then we take that awakened spirit into the, now it's not that I need to go out and help others. Because of what happened to me in the first 11 steps, I am compelled to be of service to others. And I've been open to service to others since having that spiritual awakening. I've worked with men and women for the last 27 years. And it's the joy of my life to see the light come on, to see somebody recover from the same hopeless state that I was once in, to have them conceive a conception of a God in their life, and then nurture that and open it up, and then better yet, go start working with somebody else, watch them start to work with other people. That's what gives me joy in my life today. I have a lot of good things in my life. Don't get me wrong. I have a great job, pays me a boatload of money. I have a beautiful woman in my life. I have beautiful friends in my life. But that's all on this side. On this side over here, just as equal value for me is to watch people recover from this deadly disease. And that's what we have. We have a common problem, yet we have a common solution. The common solution lies within the triangle that this meeting espouses, and other meetings just like it all around. You just have to find them. That's my experience with the 3 legacies. Thanks for letting me share.